Okay, hi everybody. A warm welcome to the presentation Digitalization as a driver on the pathway to corporate sustainability. I'm very much looking forward to spend the next 40 minutes with you, and thanks to the Digital Innovation Hub at this point for having us here. My name is Arne von Hofe. I'm 37 years old. I live in Bonn, work in Wuppertal. I'm married. I have 2 children, twins actually, which are about to turn 5, which means this is really a milestone for us personally, because we have the roughest part behind us. And from an academic perspective, I've started my career at Hewlett-Packard in IT management software sales. And after a couple of years, I made a career track change, and I then worked for Oxfam, which is a leading international development organization. And in that time, I actually got really interested in how regular for-profit companies can integrate sustainability into their business model and remain competitive or become even more competitive. Which is why I started an MBA, Sustainability Management, which I'm about to finish. And I'm very happy that I had the chance in the last years to work for the Rewe Group in the sustainability department. And since the beginning of 2021, I'm working for the CSCP. It's called the Collaborating Center on Sustainable Production and Consumption. And how do I come to the topic sustainable digitalization? Actually, when you're interested in sustainability and you're interested in or looking for breakthroughs, then the whole topic of digitalization is a highly promising topic, which is why we've dived into it. Looking at the agenda, I want to briefly introduce the CSCP, the organization, and CSR Digital, which is an innovation hub that's been funded. I will introduce it shortly. After that, we're going to take a quick look at sustainable digitalization on a systems level and also on a business level to see which perspectives we currently find in the market. And after that, I will introduce a tool which shall provide a brief orientation for the question what sustainable digitalization actually means when we talk about businesses. And we will finish with a Q&A. I would like to start with a quick interaction and introduce a model. Since I don't know who exactly is here, I was wondering if you could give me your best guess on where you personally think that the organization you are representing, in which maturity stage, a sustainability maturity stage, you would say they are located. So along the red arrow, what you see is the sustainability maturity path, and that starts with protection, it goes to value creation, and then it goes to value acceleration. And the 5 stages along that path are compliance, reducing risk, stage number 1. The second is obligation, maintaining the societal license to operate. The third is efficiency. That is the target cost savings and environmental process optimization. The fourth is leadership, sustainable innovation and business models, brand enhancement. And the fifth would be purpose, where the actual target of the organization is to increase the value for the whole society and environment. So I'd give you 10 seconds, and then I would just ask the numbers, and I would be glad if you could raise your hand if you think this is probably the stage where your organization belongs in. Okay, then let's kick off. Who would say that the organization they are representing is in stage 5? Stage 4? Stage 3. Okay, it's stage 3. I see 2 hands. Then it's stage 2. So that's probably the most hands. And the last one would be compliance, which is basically giving. I would actually wondering. I was seeing 1, 2 hands. Would you be that had a 3? Would someone be open to give a brief comment on that, or rather not? Would you like to, or not? Okay. Anybody else who would like to share an insight? All right, not a problem. Then I quickly introduce the CSCP. Our organization is around for about 15 years now. We've been founded as a joint venture from the United Nations and the Wuppertal Institute. Meanwhile, we are a completely independent organization, a non-profit organization. And we call ourselves a think and do tank. And what does that mean? For us, it means we're not so much focused on writing the long and deep scientific reports, but we rather think, okay, how can we take the knowledge of the scientific expertise that is actually available and bring it into practice? Because this is an issue that we see a lot of times in the sustainability sphere, that there is no lack of information of what the desired sustainability state is, or how we would be able to reach this place, but it's rather an issue of putting it into practice. And probably you know that from your personal life. There are intentions, the good year intentions, and then there is the new SUV calling, and then you probably don't behave the way you have intentionally or before thought you would like to do. So we're a completely international team. We have a few projects in the global south, but we mostly work in Germany and in German regions. And the overall objective that we look at is the good life within the planetary boundaries, and that is our short translation for sustainability. And we do not only classically look at what innovations and business models are needed, and also which products or more sustainable products, business and infrastructures are needed, but we also look at go really in the life of the individuals, which are about the habits, our routines. And this is what makes us somewhat unique. Today, I'm representing, with my second project, the CSR Digital Initiative. That is the first ever Center for Digital Responsibility in North Rhine-Westphalia. And it is geared towards supporting SMEs in their digital transition and ideally combining it with sustainability transformation. That means leveraging the potential for sustainability and avoiding risks. And the topics we cover in this context are, for example, the cultural dimension of sustainability. What does it actually mean to anchor this in the own organizational culture? We are informing about circular economy approaches, about responsibility in the supply chain, etc. And this is a cooperation or collaboration between the CSCP and its networking partners. The Chamber of Industry and Commerce in North Rhine-Westphalia and the Heinrich University in Düsseldorf. And we are funded by the European EFRE Fund for 2 years. And what is most important for today in this context is that this funding enables us to be here, and the insights that I will be sharing are actually based on the experience that we've gained within these projects. So just also as a reminder, if you're active in North Rhine-Westphalia and you're looking for interesting workshops, online sessions, etc., we have an own website, the social media channels, etc., and we're always open for collaboration. So to set the scene, I would once more try to get into interaction with you and ask you what you think is a more appropriate statement. Which of these two? They are obviously quite pointed, but the question is, if you had to choose, is digitalization a climate saver or is digitalization a climate killer? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it, and then I'll ask once more and would ask you to raise your hand for the option that you choose. Obviously, best guess, no scientifics involved. Okay, then who thinks that digitalization is a climate saver? That's okay, that's the majority, I would say, about 60% or even more. And who says that digitalization is a climate killer? A couple of opinions there as well. That's interesting, we're going to get back to it. Does anybody want to give a brief insight on the thoughts about it? On the positive side or on the negative? Okay.
So, yeah, in terms of digitalization as a climate saver, we later have a workshop regarding the hydrogen economy, and there is clearly definitely use case where digitalization helps to reduce emissions and decarbonization. Thank you.
Great, very much appreciated. Anybody on the climate killer side? Okay, then I take over. Okay.
It's not really an opinion, it's just an idea, because if you think about bitcoins, cryptocurrencies, what amount of energy they are consuming, I think if we have more of these currencies, they will even use more energy. So, and also all the servers, they also need a lot of energy. And if we do everything only online, then we go shopping online. I think it's amazing.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights. Actually, personally, I think there is no clear answer yet. It depends. Two facts in that regard that I want to share. In 2020, the overall, or 4% of the global CO2 emissions were due to digitalization, and the tendency is increasing. Thus, the digitalization itself is already having a higher climate impact than the aviation industry, for example. And then another interesting fact is self-driving cars. It has been calculated that they are so data intensive that 2 million such vehicles alone could generate the same amount of data as all users worldwide today, and that was in 2018. Meaning the digitalization definitely has a big footprint. And in the end, looking at the studies, what we see is the question really boils down to whether the digital means are used to replace processes or very resource-intensive processes and make them less resource-intensive, like, for example, the digital twin, or if they actually used to generate a new demand that hasn't even existed. And that is really, where it can go in one or into the other direction. This next slide is supposed to give you answers to 3 basic questions. Why is it worth thinking about sustainability apart from moral motives as a business? The second is, what is the relationship between digitalization and sustainability today? And the third is, what potential does digitalization hold for sustainable development in the future? And the first statement is from the Business and Sustainable Development Commission. That's an international, trustworthy study, and they calculated that achieving the SDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals on the United Nations level until 2030, holds business opportunities in just 4 sectors of at least $12 trillion worldwide. And I mean, I could name a lot more sources. If we look at the European Green Deal, they are investing until the end of this decade $1 billion of money for the climate transformation. So there's lots of public and also private money mobilized, which actually makes sustainability markets grow. A second quote is from the German Advisory Council on Global Change. On a systems level, digitalization processes today tend to act as a fire accelerator for existing unsustainable trends. This is actually the overall result of the most comprehensive study to date, that the digitalization is actually not a climate saver, nor overall a saver, but it is rather accelerating unsustainable trends and even creating new sustainability challenges in the digital world that haven't even existed before. And then there would be the downside, but then there are the other studies as well, which show, that is, for example, the third quote, IC2 solutions can help save 9.7 times more CO2 than they emit. And the interesting part is here, what we see is the difference between what it could do and what it actually does today. So these two trends are highly ambivalent in their relationship. It means if we look at what they do today, it's a clear thing that they are not going in the direction. They're basically accelerating on output, maximizing economy, a very resource intensive. And on the other side, we see with very many studies that the positive impact potential is immense as well. It just means it has to be used for that. So in the end, it's the question, for which purpose are digital means used? So here are a couple of interesting good practice perspectives that we found in the market. One thing is clear to say that in advance, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the EU Green Deal, they strengthen the financial value drivers for sustainability. That means beforehand externalized costs need to be internalized, or with the new EU climate taxonomy, each company will have to report on how much their business activities are aligned with the climate targets of the European Union, and they are currently adding not only climate but 5 more environmental dimensions, and they leverage the financial market to get to this point, which means it already starts now that companies that are not EU taxonomy aligned will have to pay a risk premium. That means being unsustainable is becoming more and more costly, which means on the other hand, a business case can be generated easier than in the past. So as to the graphic, we see on the x-axis, we see the stakeholder dimension, and on the y-axis we have the impact dimension. And the 4 fields that you see, they represent aggregated and highly simplified sort of strategies that we find in the market. And the cluster 1 that you see is if a business looks at their own customers and tries to prevent negative impacts, then a typical strategy is we implement world-class data privacy and data protection processes and tools. Then the second cluster is if you're looking at the entire society as an organization, and you want to prevent negative impacts, then it's often companies that implement a CSR strategy that reflects chances and risks in the digital world. So basically, they often already have a CSR strategy, and they try to bring the digital aspects into it. And then cluster 3 would be the own customers. Again, looking at your own customers and achieving positive impacts. Then the idea is, okay, we as a company could create digital products that enable customers to achieve their their sustainability targets. You can, for example, see that with the telecom. They have they name the footprint for their products, and then they also put next to it the enablement factor. They say, okay, this product, ICT product, has a footprint, but with our customers we enable a 7-8 point times higher benefit than the or handprint than the footprint. And then the cluster 4 is if you're actually looking at entire societies and achieving positive impacts. That's really companies, which we also see in the artificial intelligence field, that tap sustainability growth markets and try to solve humanity's greatest challenges. And I want to mention at that point that I can guess that probably not all of you can directly identify with one of these clusters, but then again, these are pioneers and good practice companies there what we are talking about here. Okay, now we've ended with the more systems view. Now we're looking at the business side. We've developed a project or a tool that's in a project that is funded by the Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt. And the first thing we actually wanted and needed to do was to come up with a definition. Because while CSR is well defined, the idea of what does sustainable digitalization actually mean, there is no fixed answer yet. And this is why we came up with this definition, which I want to read out and then explain in the aftermath. Sustainable digitalization in one's own company and sphere of influence means analyzing not only the technological and economic aspects, but also the effects of the use of digital technologies on the environment and society, and identifying and overcoming potential conflicts of objectives. Negative effects are to be avoided or at least reduced, and the contribution to achieving sustainability goals increased. And what you see here is that in many times when we speak with businesses, there are potential conflicts, which because at least in the sustainability management scene, we all talk about the business case for sustainability, which you want to look for, that ideally brings economic benefit and at the same time also benefits the environment or society. But in many, many cases, it actually means also a trade-off. It means valuing different values of the company and taking decisions which could be economically sound, but could have a devastating effect on the environment. And yeah, what we say is it would be a great move forward if people would actually look out for it and try to identify those and then come to a solution on how they want to handle those. This is the model that we have developed. We see here 7 fields of action that we see as a part of sustainable digitalization, if you want to tackle it. I mean, it's a holistic approach, so obviously it's not for each and every company that they want to address all of those, but it's a starting point to at least grasp the picture. And what you see in the center is that the need for more sustainable and thus for innovative sustainable products, services, that they do offer major business opportunities. And it's the business models you want to look at and your own products and the services when you want to tackle those, which is why they are in the center. Because what we find in the market is that a common perspective on this is, well, if somebody brings up the social or environmental topic, it usually comes to the idea of social sponsoring, let's donate some money, etc. But the real leverage point for every company is the products and services that they are working with. So that is also the point where you want to look at if you do want to have and generate impact. And the guiding question here is, which new business models, products and services are enabled via digitalization that have a net positive impact on the environment and society? The second field of action is the circular economy. Probably a quick question, is anybody already have come across circular economy, or is? I see a couple of people. So basically, currently what we do is we are in a linear economy. Means it's called a cradle-to-end process. So we extract the resources, and in the end we don't get them back in the circle. So the whole idea of circular economy serves the need to decouple economic growth from the resource consumption. And this is actually the most prominent model that is pushed on the European level. And the regulation that is coming from there is getting stronger and stronger. And the guiding question for this to kick off would be, how can we actually close material cycles as far as possible with digital tools? Then there's the field of action, climate, resources, and biodiversity. Since there is no planet B, effectively, there is no real alternative for us to transform the economy and society towards a climate and biodiversity-friendly and resource-conserving basis. So here again, a starting question could be, how can we actually contribute to the efficient and sparing use of scarce resources? Because the starting fields for IT companies is usually the topic of green IT, but this is the direct effect, and they can be only negative because, I mean, it's resources in use. But then when you look at the indirect effects, what you can enable with them, let's say the virtual conference that replaces the analog meetings, the digital twin, that means prototypes don't have to be built, etc. So then we come in then we're moving in a net positive direction, which is actually where we need to go. Then there is the field of sustainable consumption and production, sustainable consumption and lifestyles. This addresses the aspect that the desire and willingness for a more sustainable behavior within people, especially within the regular citizens and consumers, has been growing for years, and we can see that in a variety of studies. It is just that the intention behavior gap moves along. So at the beginning it has been 20% that say they would consume green, and then now it's probably 30%, but then there's still always the gap, and each of us knows that, in between what we say, and we would also put this in we would make a mark somewhere and say, yes, we want to consume green, but then when it actually comes to taking the decision, we often decide in a different direction. And the digital means provide completely new means to address this topic when it comes to what products are we offering, how do we do the marketing for green products, and then also in the usage phase, you can stay in touch with the consumers and provide them insights and help them actually to fulfill their own intrinsic interest. Then there is the sustainability in the supply chain topic. This is mostly relevant for producing companies. They usually have the issue that regulation is getting quite fierce. There has just been the law released in Germany, the Sorgfaltspflichten in der Lieferkette. And on the European level, they are currently working on a law that, I would say, is definitely somewhat more ambitious. And this means it doesn't really affect SMEs in the first place, but the bigger companies. And in the EU, it's a total, I think, of 50,000 companies that will be touched by this law, and they deliver it through their value chain, which means SMEs in the end then also have the issue that they need to deliver information on how their supply chain performs in terms of social and environmental issues. Digital trust is the last one I want to mention for now. The issue of trust has definitely become central following the frequent and ongoing revelations about the exploitation of personal data, as well as large-scale cybersecurity and data breaches but it also refers to aspects such as the discrimination issues when using artificial intelligence or when using data-driven business models. And that is currently, and the lead question behind that could be, how can we secure trust with a responsible approach to data and algorithmic systems? So with this, I would actually take the chance. We have 32 minutes now, means we have a couple of minutes left. I do have a takeaway slide for you with a couple of core questions I would like you to take home. But I was wondering, have any questions or ideas come up to this point that you would like to address? Are you missing anything on the slides?
Hi, so my question would be closer. Okay, my question would be, what would be the first step? Because I am working currently as a consultant, and many of our clients are struggling. I mean, what could be the first step? Is it like an analysis of the processes, or what could you recommend?
I would actually like to slow. I don't have that slide now. The typical starting point that we find as relevant is having a strategic discussion with the people that are interested in the sustainability topic at all. And then identify, and this is a piece of work, because identify at the beginning the low-hanging fruit, which has to be a business case. It has to be a business case for sustainability. And they can be found, especially with companies that haven't yet really entered this realm. So that really is the starting point. Find a small project, get some people together, get management commitment for this, and make a small project. And usually, once you have the small project done, you can work towards the next one, which is usually a lighthouse project. Make it a bit more visible within the company, or even probably some communication outside. And then at least what we see, I mean, this is the ideal process, then it would in the next steps go in the direction that a more strategic and holistic discussion starts in the organization, because once they start talking about this type of engagement, it becomes part of their DNA, step by step, but step by step. And this is actually, what we see. In the beginning, it's finding friends in the organization and identifying a business case. Anybody else? Okay. Oh.
Yeah, maybe looking from another direction, because there are many sustainable companies who start initially sustainably, and then they have to scale, especially for startups. How do we deal with the sustainability while scaling? Do you have any suggestions or any kind of guidance for that?
How to scale it on a bigger level is on a policy level is something I wouldn't want to talk about now, because this is not my field of expertise. But that is a very big question, and I do know that currently on the European level there are a couple of really big funds that are about to be built to support exactly the green digital startups. So there's the Green Startup Monitor, which is running, and then how they scale. I mean, I can just personally, I know a couple of companies in this realm that usually try to get their products but you basically cooperate with one of the big corporates. And then they can scale pretty quickly. But on the other hand, I mean, it's as always, money is needed, and therefore a good business case is needed before big money is flowing in. But yeah, for the moment, thanks for the question. Okay, then I would actually like to end my session here with 3 takeaway questions. The first is, which socio-ecological challenges can be met better than before by means of digital transformation? The second question is, what, from your point of view, is the most interesting leverage point of your company, and what could a business case for sustainability look like? And then, if you feel like it, what is the next step that you take to get the process started? Because in the end, at least looking from a climate perspective, it's more than due time to get started. And I think the whole brain power that is here in the startup world, we can definitely need those. And there are the markets that are growing. So yeah, there would be, I would be really happy if you could take those home. And then thanks very much for your attention.